On this first one, we have x squared plus 2. To get the inverse, we switch the x and the y. So this is x is equal to y squared plus 2. Subtract 2, that's x minus 2 is equal to y squared. Take the square root. Because this is square root, we need y is equal to plus or minus the square root of x minus 2. Never forget the plus or minus. You only need it on square root, not cube root. So then when we graph this, the x plus 2 is going to start off here and curve up like this on both sides, which means that's swapped on the inverse. Because y is equal to x should be our axis of symmetry between those, so they should be symmetrical across that. Is this one going to be a function? Vertical line test says it crosses twice, so no. On this one here, same kind of thing. Since it's x squared minus 3, that's going to be x plus 3, and it's going to be plus or minus the square root of that. Again, we got 1, 2, 3. We're down here. We have a parabola. So that's going to go 1, 2, 3 back in this direction, and we will have a parabola that goes like this, and y is equal to x will again be our axis of symmetry through that. And again, we can't pass the vertical line test, so no, this is not a function. Okay, that's all you need to worry about when you're doing those is vertical line tests. Down here, finding the inverse, you switch the x and y. This first one would be x is equal to, in parentheses, y minus 1 squared plus 3. So that's x minus 3 is equal to y minus 1 squared. We take the square root, and again, because it's square root, it's got to be plus or minus. So plus or minus the square root of x minus 3, the whole side. And that's y minus 1 is equal to that. I'm going to add 1 to both sides, so I'm just going to put it in the front. So that's going to be y is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of x minus 3. On this next one, just think about what you're doing. Reverse the order. This would be times 4 and then minus 5. So the inverse is going to be plus 5 divided by 4. The opposite operation in the opposite order. On this one, 3x squared plus 7, that's x minus 7. Then I would divide by 3, and then I'm going to square root. And because it's square root, it's plus or minus. Y equals on all of these, of course. And then on this last one, I'm subtracting 4, then dividing by 7. So reverse that. I am going to multiply by 7, and then add 4. Okay? Make sure you pay attention to what you're doing. Know that it should undo it, and this is going to be multiple choice. So start looking for the opposite operation, the opposite order. On the back side, f of x is this, g of x is this. Find f of g of negative 5. This is the word of. It's the exact same as having the notation with the parentheses. With the parentheses, you know you start from the inside, you work out. So since this means the same thing, start from the inside, work out. Negative 5 into g. Negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15 plus 2 is 17. Then here, 17 times 4 is a negative 68, plus 5 is a negative 63. On this one, g of f of negative 5, it's not going to be the same thing. F of negative 5 here, negative 4 times negative 5 is a positive 20, plus 5 is 25. Then we put that 25 into g. 25 times negative 3 is a negative 75, plus 2 is a negative 73. So they're not the same, and unless they're inverse, they probably won't come up the same. Okay? This one we take 4 times f of x. That's negative 16x plus 20. And I'm just going to take this as a negative 2 and distribute it through g of x. Negative 2 times negative 3 gives me a positive 6x. Negative 2 times 2 gives me a minus 4. I'm going to combine like terms. This is negative 10x, and 20 minus 4 is 16. F of 3 means I'm going to take f of 3. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, plus 5 is negative 7. So then I'm going to put a negative 7 back into f. Again, negative 7 times negative 4 is a positive 28, plus 5 is 33. Okay? F of g of x and g of f of x just means we're going to reverse the order. This exact question was actually on your last quiz. So if you didn't recognize it, shame. But I saw it more often than you. When we start with f of x, that is this, 4 plus 5x. So g of that means we put this in the place of x here in the g equation. So that's 2 times 4 plus 5x minus 1. That's 2 times 4 is 8, minus 1 would be 7. 2 times 5 is 10x, it's 10x plus 7. F of g of x, though, means we take the g of x, this right here, put it into the place of x. That would be 4 plus 5 times 2x minus 1. Distribute that. 5 times 2 is 10x. 5 times a negative 1 is negative 5. You add 4 to that, and you get a negative 1. So, not the same. All right? F of x plus g of x. What are my like terms here? This is 5x plus 2x. That would be 7x. And then 4 plus a negative 1 would be 3. And then g of 2. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6, minus 1 is 5. Okay? I'm not necessarily going to go through all of these. Just remember, it's f of g of 3. So put the 3 into the g, and then put that into the f equation. This one I will go over because it's f of g of x. Remember, that's g of x is this. So we've got negative 2x squared plus 9. We're going to put that in the place of the x in my f equation, which means it's going to be negative 3 times that plus 2. Distribute the negative 3, it makes 6x squared. That'd be minus 27 plus 2, which is a minus 25. Down here at the bottom, same kind of thing. Just be careful. Make sure you go in the proper order. You need to work from the inside out. Pay attention to when it's negative. Make sure in your calculator, if you have a negative squared, you put that in parentheses. Make sure you're working through this properly. If you have any other questions, I do have tutorials before school tomorrow, and tomorrow is Wednesday, so before the test, I will have lunch tutorials.